2, you're live. Good morning. I'd like to call a legislative committee on administrative rules to order. We have 4 members of the committee present, which does not constitute a quorum. We will not be able to update minutes. We will take testimony on the rule before us, but we will not be able to vote on it unless we get a quorum. So for the first item of business, we will have those that are here identify themselves, and then we will get on to the first item on the agenda.
Good morning, I'm State Senator Joe Bennett. I represent the Caledonia Orange District.
On the chair, Mark McDonald, I represent Orange County, 11 towns in Orange County. I serve on finance and natural resources.
Representative Trevor Squirrel representing Underhill and Jericho, Vice Chair of Lcar and House Appropriations Committee.
And I'm Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm just here to assist.
And I'm Representative Carol Odie, representing the far new north end of Burlington, and I serve on the House Ways and Means Committee.
And I'm Representative Mark Higley from Lowell, represent the Orleans Lamoille District, and sorry I can't be there today.
Okay. And Senator Benning is here today, represents Orange County.
Bray, I mean, that's me. I'm here. Senator Bray is here.
Senator, and we're expecting Senator Bray from Madison County shortly, but that is yet to be determined. First item on the agenda is the Office of Secretary of State on Rulemaking. The rule is 21P17, and the rules deal with how this committee operates. We have new rule proposals. The witnesses on the agenda: Chris Winters, Deputy Secretary of State, and Louise Corliss from the Clerk's Office in the Secretary of State. And I believe speaking on behalf of Chris Winters will be on Zoom. Introduce yourself.
I am Angela Valentinetti, and I'm also with the Secretary of State's office. So I'll be here. Unfortunately, Chris Winters could not make it today.
Welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, so we have the proposed amendments to the rule on rulemaking. We have received some comments on that, both from externally and through Lcar, and I believe through this group beforehand, and we have made some adjustments. Let me just go to my rules. So I think our big purpose here is to determine what questions Lcar may have remaining for us. We made some changes. The biggest change I think in this is to provide for ongoing ability for agencies to submit rules using an electronic submission with a conformed signature. That was something previously only allowed in our current emergency rule that is set to expire soon. And we discovered during the course of this that it was beneficial to both the agencies and our office to have this as an alternative option. The other change that we made of significance is to remove the 30-day requirement of Lcar review when we need to change our forms that are associated with the rules, the filing forms that agencies need. And that was in the interest of, I think, efficiency in the process, because they are the Secretary of State's rules. The Secretary of State's forms, to be able to accommodate changes that the agencies are requesting, or when a need arises immediately, to make that more efficient and have a smoother process for that. And I think Louise is here, and she can fill us in on if there's anything high level that I have missed.
That's
the core of it. There are some housekeeping items, just some verbiage, cleaning up some semantics, and removing one inaccurate statement that was in the rule that didn't need to be there. And that had to do with how long postings are available on the website, our portal. The posting is actually kept indefinitely. It just isn't in the recent list that's on the facing page.
And I think
That
that's
concludes
the,
your remark.
yeah, so that's the extent, I think, of our, of what we have to provide you with today. So if there are any questions, we're more than willing to answer them.
Senator Bray.
Good morning. Can I go back to the section we just talked about on the public notice? So with the strikeout that's shown in your email, it creates the impression that there's not really a sort of a guaranteed time during which someone will be able to see a public notice. But you're saying that it resides on the site permanent, it's sort of, in essence, permanently? Is it? I'm trying to
Yes.
understand.
It is. It just means that they'd have to go to the search page to actively look up the item, and it can be searched by the number, by the title, by the topic. All of those fields are available. The notice is generally not removed from the recent page until 2 weeks after it's adopted. At that point, the notice really isn't considered active because there's been an action that's formally finished.
Okay. Is there any information in the public notice that someone might want to consider later? For instance, the extent of the rule, or something where someone might find it useful information to still be able to consult after the fact?
Yes.
And that's why we continue
And
to
that's
make it
why
available
yeah.
on the page, even after it's been adopted. It's just no longer in the recent area.
Okay, so we're not diminishing access to it. We're just no longer listing it. We won't be listing it twice. Is that what you're saying?
So the way that the website works, it runs off a database in the background. That data still lives in the database itself, but there's the facing page of the site for ease of use lists those rules that are considered recent. That's anything that's pending adoption, and up to 2 weeks past adoption, they'll remain in that list. So for instance, if I want to go back to 2010 and look at a rule that was promulgated then, I can still do that. I just need to go to the search form and tell it what I'm looking for.
It's just no longer highlighted on that main page. So the main recent areas that it highlights those, the specific set of some of the pending rules,
Great, thanks very much. I just wasn't, I've been on the site, but not familiar enough with it to know quite well. I just wanted to make sure we weren't losing public access to information. Thank you.
No, that information is still all widely available.
Representative Higley has a question.
Representative Higley.
Thank you. This is maybe a question for more seasoned members of Lcar, but a little bit of a concern for me and maybe an explanation of doing away with that 30-day notification for Lcar and iCar on filing forms. Has there been any issues in the past with changes like that Lcar has observed and been concerned with, or just what does that process look like? And again, concerned about legislative intent on some of that. And I guess it appears that it's ongoing. It isn't a temporary removal. It's ongoing. There will be no more 30-day notification on any filing form changes.
You're asking those of us who are your colleagues on the committee? Or are you
Well,
asking the
right,
witness?
ones that, have more experience with this. Again, I haven't been on long enough to see any of those filing form changes come before us. And in the past, has there been any concern about what some of those forms are looking like? Do you feel comfortable that there's no need for that 30-day notification on changing those forms?
Well, that'd be a good question.
I understand that,
It has not been a concern because they have been available 30 days ahead of time, and we are looking at a situation where they might not be available 30 days ahead of time.
Right, I understand the efficiency and the expediation of it, the expedia of it, but again, I just maybe a question for Secretary of State's office is, are we talking any changes, or are we talking just minor changes when it comes to certain forms that need changing?
So when we're focused on this, we have the actual rule on rulemaking, and obviously that's the rule that would still proceed through the normal course of the rulemaking process. For the forms that we at the Secretary of State's office develop, we wanted to have the flexibility to be able to make changes as needed. And then obviously there would be a period of time for the agency users that are going to be using those forms, or agency users of those forms, we want to be able to have a period of time where they're going to be aware of the proper forms. It's not something where we can ever just change a form and say the next day, this is the form that now must be used. We have a lot of agencies that are in the midst of filing rules, and so we would want to be able to give them that kind of flexibility to continue using an existing form for a certain period of time. But it's really about allowing us to have that flexibility when we need to clarify something, and if we have a short time frame that we want to be able to get that clarification out.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Again, I guess going forward, if we see an issue with some agency that has a concern, that hopefully they'll get in touch with their legislators, and we can maybe reverse that again. Thank you.
And just so you know, we didn't have any comments from the agencies related to that particular feature, that part of the proposed changes.
I might also iterate that our office is pretty flexible in its interactions with the agencies and the committees involved in this process. And we do involve each other greatly. We have a good communication that goes back and forth. And if there's something that the committee wants to change, we're definitely open to that. As a matter of fact, we've been kind of working with Lcar on some suggested changes. We haven't implemented anything as yet, but there were some things that they have found particularly difficult to understand with the way that the current set of forms is laid out and the instructions. They're seeing some kind of areas where the agencies don't know how to answer the question, what they're really looking for on that. And we've met a couple of times. Once we go through with those final changes, it was expected that once we finalize them, that we would probably make those changes. And if the committee has any further inputs, that we would be as open from Lcar to review those and make changes accordingly as well. It's not to kind of step on toes or make a determination on what's required so much as just how to explain to the agencies what the committees are looking for, what the statute is looking for as far as those responses.
Okay, thanks again for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Any further questions for the witnesses? Or any comments from the committee? But this committee is in a unusual situation today. We have proposals before us that we cannot vote on because we do not have a quorum. We have amendments today that need approval to the rules proposed by the administration, but we cannot vote on those amendments today because we don't have a quorum. So I'm going to ask our legal counsel on how we move forward. And the question would be, are the rules that have been sent to us according to our policies, that if we don't take action, the rules go into effect anyway. And if they do go into effect anyway, we haven't taken action on the amendments either. And so perhaps you will help us with that.
Certainly.
Question.
Thank you, Chair. So you have identified the little bit of a pickle that you're in. Under 3 VSA Section 843A1, an adopting authority, which here would be the Secretary of State's office, may adopt a properly filed final proposed rule after the passage of 45 days after filing of a final proposal under Section 841 of its title, provided that the agency has, and this is the part that you would be doing here if you objected, has not received notice of objection from Lcar. So because you don't have a quorum, you're not able to object. You're also not able to approve, but because you're not objecting, they can adopt the rule within 45 days of when it was filed, which is September 12th. So it's just a couple of days from now. So doing nothing, they can adopt the rule as it was filed as the final proposed rule. As you have noted, there have since been amendments to what they filed as the final proposed rule. Those are laid out in the memorandum from Deputy Secretary Winters. I think the majority of them are probably typographical errors, which they would have the ability to correct had you approved. There is language in 843B that says the text of the adopted rule shall be the same as the text of the final proposed rule submitted under Section 841, except that any germane change may be made by the agency in response to an objection. And that's what requires Lcar to actually vote upon. And it's a majority of the committee, not just members present, so setting aside the quorum piece, or expressed concern of Lcar. So I think you can express concern about the things that have been identified that were typos. The language in Section 4 that is an inconsistency with practice where the rule stays up, the notice stays up permanently. It's only in that recent area for 2 weeks and they could proceed. I think if you really wanted to be very obvious about what Lcar was acting upon and give Lcar the ability to act, then you need to get the agency to grant an extension on that 45 days and come back in 2 weeks. There's going to then be a gap because the emergency rule on rulemaking that has been in effect sort of for 3 iterations now of those 180 days to allow the non-wet signature, the conforming signature, there would be a gap. I think the Secretary of State's office could have another emergency rule to fill in that 2-week gap. It gets a little clunky there. So there are some options in there.
Thank you. Thank you for being funky, and we're in a pickle, which I think the public understands. Are we amending,
Phrases.
are we amending an emergency rule or a,
This is a permanent rule. It is based on the emergency rule, and that came up because of the wet signature piece.
so
So
that
you've seen something
continues
like
both the
this.
pickle and the funkiness of it. Thank you. So, we can't order anything because we don't have a quorum. My personal view is that this would be resolved, the best resolved when we have a quorum, but we do not control that. If the Secretary of State's office also believes that this would best be resolved, that we could adopt both the rule, perhaps have a discussion with a quorum on the questions that Representative Higley asked. And finally, be able to approve the amendments that were published 6 or 7 days ago and are before us today. The best course of events would be to approve the agency to ask for an extension. But we're not in control of it. We're in a pickle. Secretary of State's office, it's all yours.
Yeah, this was unexpected. So I have not prepared to think this through. Can you just clarify again, if we were not inclined to extend this, which version? It sounded like it would be the version that was the final proposed rule that would be the one that would be proceeding forward without any of these, without any of the edits, the suggested edits.
Without any of the amendments, some of which have been characterized by council as technical.
Yeah.
And others have been characterized by council as being more complex than simply technical.
That's a great recitation. Yes, I think it would be under the statute, the version that you clearly can adopt because of language that says you can act on what has been filed. If this committee doesn't act within 45 days, which it can't because of the lack of quorum, that's the version that you could adopt. I think there is language that sort of alludes to the ability to make some changes, but then, you know, we're in a position where maybe there's a little bit of ambiguity as to whether or not there is authority to do that.
Okay. And Louise, can you just inform me about the ability to, I know we've only talked about this briefly, the ability to get an emergency rule?
We can refile the emergency rule today if need be. We can do that and give the committee the extension that they'd like. It's just a little more work, that's all. And truthfully, because the original emergency rule does not actually expire until the 28th, we have a little room to work on that if need be.
And I think that in the interest of keeping good relations with Lcar, of course, and working together, I don't feel, and the fact that we could get an emergency rule out, I believe that we could certainly approve or accept.
We'd have to grant the 45 day
a grant
an
of
extension of
45
that.
is, or a 2. I thought there was a 2 week, or is there, how much time of an extension are we looking at?
When does Lcar currently plan to hold its next meeting?
September 23rd, so 2 weeks.
December 23rd would be Lcar's next meeting. And I
Okay.
believe you just said that you were going to think about whether to do an extension beyond September 23rd, or whether or not to file these proposed rules with the amendments as an emergency rule. Those are the two things you're looking at right now?
Yes. So the Secretary of State's
So
office.
you assure us that you will pick one of those two things.
Yes, so the Secretary of State's office will grant an extension to September 23rd. And then we can go, and then I think we can go from there if there's any issues with that. It sounded like it may be questionable whether that meeting actually happens, or is that a definite?
You have 2 rules scheduled. I think Charlene has put the.
We have 2 rules scheduled. We will meet, and if that is your decision, we
Yes,
are no longer in a pickle.
yes, that is, yes, we will grant an extension until the September 23rd meeting.
Thank you.
And then you guys just need to ensure that your
Yes.
compatriots are here.
We will
Other pickle.
seek to not be embarrassed on the 23rd of the
So
month
just as
of a quorum.
a method of ensuring that, why don't we just give the extension into October? Just to make sure that that happens. If we're filing another emergency rule, we'll have another 180 days at our disposal to give the committee the maximum amount of time necessary to review and go forward. We know that oddities happen and COVID is rearing its ugly head again. So things happen. By
Okay.
tying us into a 2-week, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. If that's your decision, if decision is to do it by the 23rd or later, that's your decision. And we appreciate it. No one understands, of all the agencies in state government who understand rulemaking, no agency understands it better than you folks. So the decision that you make on the extension, we will, I'm speaking for myself, would please me, and I'm sure other members of the committee.
So it's like a logistical matter, since Charlene's out until Monday, and she would typically send the extension granting to the agency to then sign and return. Do you guys want to consult amongst yourselves and then email Charlene with the date that the extension should go until, and she can send that form to you to sign and return?
Is that here at the Secretary of State's office, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, we can
Sorry, I
connect with.
looked at the 2 of you, but you can't.
Okay,
tell
oh,
that.
yeah. We can connect with Charlene, certainly.
Thank you.
Okay.
October
Is
7th.
there any
After the 23rd.
further
Yes.
business before the committee that does not have a quorum?
Do we have the power to adjourn?
Yeah, we're now going to ask if we have the power to adjourn, or perhaps we have never met.
Oh, yeah, you can just stop, tell Zoom to turn off. You don't have to take any formal action.
I will have to comment that I've never seen an on-air sign like Michael has on his desk since I was working in a radio station back in the 1970s. Very classic, Michael.
They're in a bunch of rooms too.
I'm impressed.
I can't see it. That's okay.
They saw it the second time.
Well, I will ask for a motion to adjourn, whether it's called for or not. Senator Bray.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Senator Bray's moved that we adjourned, and those of us not constituting a quorum will be asked to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Okay.
All those in favor say nay. And thank you. And Secretary of State's office, thank you for getting us out of this pickle.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Before we dissolve, I'm wondering if we might just amongst ourselves talk virtual members of the committee and try to make sure we have a quorum on the 23rd. We're all connected.
I can be there on the 23rd.